Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. A very good morning and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And terima kasih kepada saudara dan saudari Muslim Majlis. This morning I would like to share a little bit about my experience and project with the Archive National of Malaysia. So I was given to sharing about the usage of archival material for education purpose. Before we going to further, I would like to share with you a little bit video to open our mind. This is a small promotion for my university also. These are the applications that we have developed together, some of it with National Archive of Malaysia.
Do you realize how many kids relate to that fish swimming upstream in class, never finding their gifts, thinking they are stupid, believing they are useless? Well, the time has come, no more excuses. I call school to the stand and accuse him of killing creativity, individuality, and being intellectually abusive. He's an ancient institution that has outlived his usage. So, Your Honor, this concludes my opening statement. And if I may present the evidence of my case, I will prove it. Exhibit A, it's a modern day phone. Recognize it? Here's a phone from 150 years ago. No difference, right? Stay with me. Here's a car from today. And here's a car from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Now get this. Here's a classroom of today. And here's a classroom from 150 years ago. Now ain't that a shame? In literally more than a century, nothing has changed. Yet you claim to prepare students for the future? With evidence like that, I must ask, do you prepare students for the future or the past?
Sorry, there is overlapping audio. That should be the last video. This was taken from the YouTube. I would like to share with everybody here. see this last video, you should see clearly and understand what it's all about.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, my fellow speakers. First of all, I would like to apologize for not having good voice today because I've been coughing, but I hope that will be part of the memory that you have, a presenter who coughs during the presentation. Memory is very important. It's very central to the notion of the archive itself. I think when we talk about the archive, there's no denying that we're talking about how to preserve the memory. For my presentation today, I'll be bringing you through some parts of the journey that I had gone through while doing a research on exploring digital or exploring Malaysian film archive. That was actually the title of my research that I did in 2015. And I'm not going to present that particular research or report on that particular research because I think there's a lot more to be done when it comes to film archive in Malaysia. But what I'm going to share with you today is some of the questions, some of the concerns that arise from that particular research. Before I proceed, I would like to talk about the archive itself. You know, when I started doing the research on film archive, I was really nervous because I needed to go to the Malaysian archive. Those who have been to the archive in Malaysia, you know how huge the place is and how isolated the place is, how alien the place is. You know, and to get in, you have to have a card and, you know, stuff like that. But I think that's the nature of the National Archive. It has to protect, because one thing, as I said about memory, is the archive stores the memory. The National Archive stores the institutional memory. But more importantly, the question that I raised at that time is, whose memory, albeit institutional, that we actually store in the archive? Hence, I see the archive as a place of political importance and not merely historical or social importance. Because what is decided to be kept in the archive is very much determined by the power that be of that day, the power of that day. So there are so many conflicts that I have when I do that. And my job is actually to reconcile the difference between the archive itself and the need to apply it in education. UKM, being one of the research universities in Malaysia, requires us to translate research into education purposes. So that is also the conflict that I have. There are so many issues when we look at film archive itself. One of them is the material and the location of film archives in Malaysia. Because in Malaysia we have, if I were to show you this is a huge gargantuan building, the audiovisual unit of the National Archive. It's such a wonderful building, but at the time when I went in, it was quite empty because there was no materials inside that. I don't know, maybe 5 years down the line, we still have something, but I see one of the respondents, she's here, of my research. She's smiling, signaling that, well, nothing much has changed. But that's the idea, isn't it? When you talk about film, the question of originality, which is also the central question in archive. What do you keep in a film archive? How do you determine that the one that you keep is the original, and is originality of the film, whether it's the original film, still central to archiving work now? You know, and I've interviewed some filmmakers themselves, and they said they didn't know where to leave their materials. Some actually decided to donate their materials, film materials, to the Asian Film Archive in Singapore instead of in Malaysia. Because there are so many issues with film archive in Malaysia. So another question that I would like to raise is the idea of the private and the public as well. One important question that I have at the time is, how do I actually treat this material in the archive? Because of the institutional status of the artifacts in the archive itself, how do you bring it to education? Of course, the first speaker actually brought that through technology, but I always question the essence of the archive itself. How do you bring archival material outside of the archive, but people think of it as an archival material rather than just another product in your apps? Because I think that consciousness about it being an archival material is central to the existence of the archive itself. Otherwise, it can just be anything, anywhere. Okay? So for this presentation, I would like to present some ideas and issues and also analyze how the media education can help or can utilize what we have in the archive. My argument is with the film archive, I think when we look at the first presentation as well, you realize that a lot of researchers, when they approach the archive, they approach it as a place of history, heritage. I think I would like to see a move away from just looking at it as heritage or history. I think the film archive can do that with the help of education. Because for me, what's important is film archive is not about the past, but it is also about the future. Okay? One prominent researcher in film archive, which is Collenberg, argues that the film archive can be a cradle of a new film culture. That means it frees film from the shackle of historical connotation. It can move film into a new technology while retaining the essence of the archive itself. Okay. This is me to prove that I've been to the archives. But this is one of the archives, a film archive dedicated to one important Malaysian celebrity. Yeah? But this place is also quite isolated. Quite isolated. I would rather call it a gallery rather than an archive, but that is also an ontological question. Okay. So why the archives? For me, there are three main concerns when we look at the archives from educational perspective. One, of course, the ontological inquiries. That means we need to ask, okay, the archive provides the primary data for research, for education. So how do we bring that notion of originality to classroom or to the research itself, all right? However, I think for practitioners in the archive, they already realize that there is a shift in ontological understanding of what an archive can be. I think one of the best examples is the technology presented by the first speaker. Meaning there is a shift of the restriction of the building itself to technology. So we don't really understand or know what an archive is in that sense. I think that kind of ontological ambivalence is beneficial for education because we are not tied to the conservative idea of what an archive is, but we can move forward with technology. So in the sense that when we talk about it, we are talking about not the way technology disrupts the archives, but the way technology harmonizes the archive with education. But I would like to see it move beyond providing historical artifacts, but providing an interpretation or meaning of the present and the future. Okay, so technology that helps reproduce the primary resources, both for preservation and installation purposes, actually liberates the archive from the shackle of its ontological what I call, I'm sorry, ontological arrogance of not wanting to let go of what it ought to do, right? So in the sense that the archive should not just be seen as that gargantuan building, the way I described earlier, but it's a place that people can go and visit and be part of it. Okay, the next question that I have is regarding the epistemological inquiries. Epistemological inquiries, in this sense, relates to how the films in the film archive, or in the context of the whole archive, positioned in the archive itself. And how, in the sense that my question is, how new knowledge about cultural, legal, policy, social context can be produced or reproduced through the archive. For example, through film exhibition, right? Through film exhibition and performance. But usually, when we do film exhibition at the archive, we just exhibit the film. But the context and the discussion of the film are usually ignored. So it's important when you do, especially in education, at educational level, when you do a film exhibition or film performance or show, it has to be contextualized within the discussion of materials that can be found within the archive itself. In the sense that you bring technology out of the archive, but at the same time, you bring the essence of the archive as well. All right? So in the sense that this is quite related to what Derrida talks about when he talks about archival fever, right? Archival fever is about how technology helps to construct the meaning of the materials in the archive. So technology is central to the archive. Therefore, technology helps to restructure the way we look at the archival material. The last question that I have is actually axiological inquiries. In the sense that the question is, what values do archival materials have on media or film studies, or what values do film studies have on the archive itself? You know, in the sense that in what way film studies can contribute to the archive and what the archive can contribute to the film studies. Values is very important because film usually use archival materials to contextualize the story, the narrative. I think we have seen a lot of historical films with snippets from the archives. But I think film should do more than just bringing archival material to contextualize the narrative of that particular film. I think this is the job of critical media studies. Okay, I think it is important to understand as well, we need to see how the media uses archival material to propose not only the present cultural context, but also the future cultural context, in the sense that it helps to predict the future. So the archival material should not be about transposing the audience to the past, but also transposing the audience to the future, to predict what happens to the future. All right? Okay, so now we talk about the media education itself. There are three, for me, there are three angles or paradigms that there are three paradigms that we need to look at, which is the critical perspective of the media itself, which is questioning the function of the media in the archive, and media culture and society, in which we look at the intersection of the three elements in the relationship between the media culture and society. And of course, media history and media ecology. I think there is a difference between media history and media ecology. I think media history excavates a lot of artifacts in the archive, whereas for media archaeology includes you know, the use of what do you call that, audiovisual in the archive itself. So the difference between, like, say, your experience of watching old film in nitride form and HD film, That is the concern of media archaeology. Your experience in watching the films in both formats is actually central to media archaeology. That harks back to the question of bringing the essence of the archive to education. Because nowadays, I think even in Malaysia, it's very difficult to find non-HD television. And I remember when I came back from my studies a few years ago, I brought a lot of videotapes because, where I studied before, we used videotapes. And I actually shipped huge box of videos. But when I arrived, there's no video cassette player anymore. No, it was in 2000 something and not 1970s. I'm talking about 2000 something. So when I came back, and of course some of the films, the tapes, got destroyed because of the mold. See, preservation, conservation is very important, but I wasn't aware of that. But the problem is I couldn't play the tapes because the technology is no longer applicable in Malaysia. And according to my brother, most of the films that I brought back were available in a CD form, right? So I wasted a lot of money shipping, but but the problem is when I watch the CD version of it, it actually takes away the experience of, rewinding, that experience. I think that is the essence of the archive that I'm talking about, that I struggle to sort of reconcile when I bring it to education. Because how do you share that kind of experience with young people who know only about the new technology and not the old technology? I think that is a conflict the archive needs to address as well. Okay, and let me speed it up because I think I have about a few more minutes. Okay, of course, the conceptual theories. How do we capture the essence of the archive? That was a question. And what conceptual frameworks to use? I have been using a lot of feminist framework because that's part of what I do. I use a lot of feminist framework in the sense that I look at female film directors, female films, or female characters in the films, right? And what theories can be taught? There are several, but coming from cultural studies background, I use a lot of critical theories. But importantly, a branch of cultural studies, which is visual culture, is very relevant to the study of the media in the archive, right? Okay. Since we talk about education, so it's inevitably we have to talk about the operational issues. What more can media education do with the archive? Of course, as I said, the idea of using film preserved in the archive can be quite daunting, but a scholar, Borhausen, says, if material is to be made accessible, the varied and frequently problematic nature of film material makes it necessary to define standards of this process. What he says here is, we in education need to understand when you a archival material, it's not just about the artifacts, but about the context of the artifacts and the material of the artifacts. That's the reason why the question of originality has to be discussed with the students so they understand that at the end of the day, they are looking at the copy of the film rather than the film itself, because it does bring different understanding of archival material. And what policy and implementation constraint do we have to deal with? I think now technology liberates the archive, but at the same time, we need to understand what can be shared and what not to be shared, because the archive, especially the National Archive, is a political place. Okay? So how far can can the knowledge from the archive be disseminated? Of course, one example is through the technology, through publication and whatnot. But I think through film exhibition, through film screening and discussion, that can be done at the university or in school, helps to disseminate information about the archive. But the thing is, the moment you talk about the archive to students now, the idea of history, the idea of artifacts, historical artifacts, will actually overwhelm them, okay? In terms of pedagogy, okay, so the way forward, How much time do I have? Am I okay? 2 minutes, okay. So the way forward is the question of how do we benefit from the fourth industrial revolution is very important. I think science, as I said, has liberated the archive, but it can also constrain the archive from being what they are. You know, if you share in the sense that you bring public material to private space in which it's used individually, then the essence of the archive might be jeopardized along the way. But I think with technology, because young, or especially the younger generations, they are so familiar with the archive. But I think when you study the archive, there's a need for you to be at the physical location of the archive itself, to appreciate the kind of job that archivists have done, because I think they have done a lot of work, and it's not easy to preserve, especially with very limited budget. Okay. And another one, of course, this question is quite relevant to Malaysia, to Malaysians. Like, how do we benefit from the Fajar doctrine of the New Malaysia? I think everybody knows about the New Malaysia. And the Fajar doctrine is a dawn doctrine in which we are talking about, you know, the New Malaysia, liberating Malaysia from the shackle of the past. So in the sense that the Fajar doctrine actually helps us to kind of reconcile the idea that the National Archive or the Film Archive as an institutional memory that belongs to the power that be, to a more people-centric archive. That means the people should be able to talk about the archive and also construct the structure of the archive in their own way. So in the sense that the archive should also be ready to be challenged by the voices of the public, of the people, in the sense that it will also challenge the meaning, the understanding, the epistemology, the ontology, and also the axiology of the archive. Thank you.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, I would like to thank the National Archive of Malaysia and Sarbika for inviting us to share our experience in explain the impacts of using archive in teaching and learning. Today, I would like to talk about the empowering student learning through the use of archive material at the Faculty of Information Management, University Technology Mara, Malaysia. Actually, in the Faculty of Information Management, we have 4 programs, which is Information Management in Library Science, Information Management in Information System Management, Records Management, and also Information Resource Center. So actually this paper described the experience of the Faculty of Information Management, University of Technology Mara in managing student learning through the utilization of archival material as part of their learning endeavor. So we are encouraging, and actually we are emphasize the usage of the primary sources in our teaching and learning. I would like to talk about the actual use of archives and the reflections of the usage of primary sources in our teaching and learning process in the faculty. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, empowering student learning through the use of archival material is a way to address the growing awareness and demand for preparing students to effectively participate in the emerging knowledge and know-how to utilize the importance of primary sources in their learning processes. So usually in the faculty and also in the learning institution, we are only have the opportunity to give the student the published material in our learning sources. So actually we are overlooked on how we are going to use the archival material in our teaching and learning. So Actually, today's demand is to prepare students to effectively participating in the emerging knowledge and know how to utilize the importance of primary sources in their learning processes. And the goal is empowering student learning through the use of archival materials. So we have a lots of various of information sources nowadays. And in the Bachelor of Information Records Management program, we are offering and also instill and emphasize the usage of the archival material that is offered in the National Archive of Malaysia. So the actual use of archives, actually I would like to talk about the 4 programs that are related in using the archival material. Number 1 is the CCARE project. So what does it mean by the CCARE project? CCARE project is a creative corner of archival repository exhibition, CCARE. The objective of this project is to recognize the effort taken by the student to be shared. There are 3 main components, of course, involved in this courses. Actually is the archive administration, IMR 455, planning and design of archival repository, IMR 505, preservation of archival material, IMR 552. So besides offering this course to the course student, we are open this subject to the elective student just to expose them with the archival materials. So the theme is varies, depends on the students' interest and also the lecturers' of interest. Okay. Student engage not only with the physical archive, but also reproducing material digitally and making links between resources such as photographs, correspondence, and draft of manuscript, tapping on their own originality and creativity to communicate their tasks to the citizen of the faculty. So actually we have 6 projects of CCARE for all this while, but before this, maybe we have a CCARE project, but it is based on the not specific theme given, where students are free to exhibit their assignments. Okay, the first CCARE activities that involve with the material of primary sources is the CCARE project. The theme is Caricature Archive. The search project is done by examining the caricature collection at the National Archive Holdings, and the findings are exhibited on the CCARE Day at the faculty. The day is inaugurated by the well-known cartoonist in Malaysia. So usually when we have this, student will be assigned to find how many materials and what are the information that needed, especially on the primary sources on the related assignment. For example, this the caricature archive. So when they have finally find the information and also compile the information, there will be an exhibition in the faculty. So this one is the one of the example of. So on CCARE 3 project, the theme is Military Archive. Besides the exhibition on their findings of the subject matter, a military archive curator is invited to deliver a keynote on the management of military archive at the Ministry of Defence. Besides giving a student an exposure to the primary sources, we have invited the military department to come to our faculty and give a keynote speech. And CCARE 4 project the theme is Film Archive. The research this time is to trace the history of Malay film industry since 1930s. The outcome is inspiring to the visitors of Malay film fans, getting more information on their favorite films and actors. The preference is film produced by the legend Piramli and his chosen cast and friends. Okay, CCARE 5 project, the theme is Transportation Archive, where students are required to trace the history of land, sea, and air transportation. So when they have compiled all the information, the outcome of this CCARE project is the finding aids. So the finding aids is very important, just because to give the students an information and also the package of primary sources that we compile. So we have the finding aids of transportation, proton, James Bond Malaya, Datuk Jin Samsudin. Hence, I would like to talk about the RDES project. So the archival description project. As we know that archival description and arrangement is very important in archival institution, and one of the advocacy program, archival description project is another endeavor worth mentioning, where students are exposed to handling the real archive. The touching, the feeling, and the smelling of physical archive probably existed long before they were born, giving them the sense of thrill and excitement to learn more about the past through those archives. So students have been given an opportunity to touch the record, the material, and to feel the material, and maybe they will be analyzed the past history of the archival material. This one is a collaborative project between the faculty and the National Archive of Malaysia, which is started in 2013. So we would like to thank National Archive of Malaysia because giving us an opportunity to give a place of hands-on to the student in the arrangement and description. Actually, the task student described the archive, which later to be transferred into the online finding aids at the National Archive of Malaysia, which is held by Encik Kamrul Azwan and Datin Jatul Izzah and Puani Azliza. So, are these activities in National Archive Malaysia? Okay, we can see the student are doing the description of publication, the file, the personal papers, and maybe publication. Okay, next is Archival Records Conservation Project. So, conserving archival record is amazingly an exciting course for the student. Through this collaborative project, students are exposed to the basic know-how techniques of conserving paper documents for ultimate preservation. They are taught how to do overcasting and encapsulation of archival material. So the process and also the technique and the demonstration given by the National Archive is quite amazing and remarkable, because students can see and can feel and can watch a live of the demonstration and feel and to do the practical training. So the key lesson is to love and care of the fragile archive. Okay, this is the picture of the lab work in National Archive and the faculty. So students will be given the binded material, the bind material. Usually they will be taught on overcasting, and also some of it is cross-stitch and some of the conservation work. Okay, records appraisal and disposal project. The faculty is privileged to have access to University Archive as well. It is indeed an excellent training ground for the student to handle the actual archive in a somewhat different surroundings and context. The goodwill and generosity of working together has created win-win collaboration between the faculty and the University Archive. The students are given a series of non-active records to appraise for archival value, which requires them to apply their theoretical knowledge learned to the classroom. So, so this is the where the archival university held the activity and process of the archival, the appraisal and disposal project. Okay, reflections. So impact of using archive in teaching and learning is some reflection is archives inspire. So by undertaking the project, students could reflect on how archive enhance our understanding of place, people, the past, and the administrative process of organization. So the breadth of those project reveals that people can be inspired by archive collection. As a result, students become aware of history and become inspired by the lesson learned from historical events and reminiscence. So it is very important to give an exposure to the student on the importance of the history of Malaysia and also the organization itself, especially on the administrative history. So archives motivate. Getting to know the archive will give a better understanding of the role of archival work in historical research at the documentary records. This further motivates the building of skills emphasized in teaching archival literacy or archival intelligence. Also, archival competency teaches students how to behave as archivists, their role and responsibility in organization and to the society at large. Archives and critical thinking. Teaching students to think critically and reflectively has become a major focus on education within the last decade in Malaysia. In fact, several national reports and studies has charged higher education with the responsibility to produce individuals capable of thinking critically and independently. No doubt, the archive has an important role to play in developing and implementing instructional workshop and courses designed to increase students' awareness of archive and improve their use and understanding of archival materials. The present collaboration could be improved by embedding the application of critical thinking skills in the analysis and interpretation of primary sources. So the conclusion, the enthusiasm shown by our students on the archival material is tremendous. This is an interesting and stimulating exercise for them. On the whole, they embrace the material extremely well and create incredibly moving public remembrance. Watching students connect with the past through the archival record has been an exceedingly rewarding experience for educators and probably the archivists, which explain precisely the reason why archives matter. Archives indeed have provided the connection to the past that will help to create the meaning for the present and the future. Subsequently, archivists and educators inevitably need to work hand in hand to establish a strong and robust learning infrastructure where archives education is concerned. I hope my presentation is beneficial. Thank you very much.
Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to ladies and gentlemen who have been here since yesterday. I assume that none of you have been a teacher. You have been an archivist. But I have been a teacher, I have been a researcher, I have been an archivist, I have been everything as a teacher. This is what a teacher do in school. They have to be everything. They have to play the role of everybody in the classroom. Yeah. I will just go through shortly about education system in Malaysia. So you have an overview of what education system is about in Malaysia, since most of you are, or none of you are educationist or teacher. Okay, so we have a preschool at the age of 4 to 6. Preschool is 4 to 6 and primary is 6 plus to 11 and lower secondary 12 plus to 14 and we have upper secondary 15 to 16 and post-secondary 17 to 18 plus and then the higher education. The three speakers were talking about kids of the age beyond 18 plus, yeah? Adults. They can be considered adults. But what I'm going to talk about is kids of the age of 4 plus, yeah, 4 plus to 17 plus, yeah. Okay, and this is our Malaysia Educational Blueprint from 2013 to 2025. This blueprint stipulates the 6 key attributes of a student of the age 4 to 17 plus, as I mentioned earlier. If you look at it, okay, we have knowledge, yeah. Students need to have the knowledge relevant for their age. Thinking skills, they need to have the skills to think and solve problems and be creative in their own way and in their level of their age. And also leadership skills, bilingual, and ethics and spirituality. This is a very important factor in Malaysia. We give emphasis to this, and also national identity, yeah, okay, because in Malaysia we have many cultures and many religions, and so there need to be national identity for the kids to grow up in different kind of culture and also religious background. And on the right is the, I have the 21st century learners. Yeah, what we expect the 21st century learners to be like. Kids of the age of 4 to 17 plus are trained in a gradual manner. Of course, we don't force them, but we do it gradually to make sure that they have the skills of the 21st century learners. Basically, the 4 skills, the 4 C's that I'm sure you all know, yeah. Collaboration, communication, creativity, and so on. Okay, in school, searching for archival materials, mostly in the resource centers. Each school have a resource center. Some countries call it library, but in Malaysia, we call it resource center. And in resource center, we have, part of it is library, yeah? We have books. And there are also archive materials. There are also other kind of resources that is available. And there are other ways of searching for archive materials in schools. For example, yesterday we were introduced to the Today in History apps. Yeah, that can be a very good app for the children to know about Malaysia. That is through the online searching of archival materials. Yeah? Okay, we also provide internet connectivity to all schools. Yeah. There are some schools that get very good connectivity, and some, of course, especially in the rural areas, their connectivity might be a little slow, but they still have the connectivity for them to search for materials online, and also visits. Yeah, okay. This is part of school life. Teachers will have projects, and at the end of the projects, the students will visit certain places that may have connection to archive. And also, we have the primary source. Okay, the use of archival materials. Yeah? Okay, in school, archival materials can be used for many many reasons. In the past, archival materials used for history, learning of history, but nowadays it's being used for many other areas like language. Yeah, people do research on what was the language like in the early years. They can do a comparison between the old language and the new language. Yeah. And also science, they can know what is the kind of animal or what kind of plants that we had in the past and how it evolved in the present. Also on geography, yeah, how the landscape was in the past through maps that we have in the archives. And also culture, how people behave, how people, what's the kind of clothes that people wear in the past, yeah, and economics, yeah, what kind of jobs they do in the past, yeah, and also hobbies. Okay, students can have hobbies like collecting old photographs and even old stamps, yeah, that is available. Okay. The use of archive materials have resulted in many things for the students. For example, the students are very active in using the materials. It makes them very interested and also very excited, yeah, to use the materials. And also they can do a lot of projects and problem-based learning through archival materials. There is cooperation and teamwork because every time we do a project, there is a group, yeah? They work in groups. Usually they work in a group of 2 or more so that they can exchange their ideas, they can talk about the projects and so on. And also it's inquiry based. They need to collect data on what they're doing and they need to ask a lot of questions. They need to do research, research at their level. And also they use the 21st century skills that is expected of them in the process of using the archival materials in their projects. And also the civic responsibility, they tend to know what happened before, why it happened, and why is it like this now, yeah? Okay. In schools, we have special rooms. As I mentioned earlier, we have a resource center. This room can be dedicated to certain subjects. And in that room, they will have some copies of archival materials. Most of the time, they take it from the online resources available. And some I've seen, they get the originals from the local archives. Yeah? For example, if the school is situated in a mining area, they can go to the mining area and get some samples of iron ore that they can have it in the special room that they have. Also, it can be thematic exhibition where every month they will have different kind of exhibition which uses the archival materials. For example, if it is the month of August, August is the month of Merdeka. Merdeka means Malaysia's Independence Day. Yeah? So we will have photographs of how Malaysia got its independence and so on, and also local history. They are exposed to the local history of their own school or the surroundings of the schools, yeah, and also local heroes and icons. Okay, the approach that the teachers use is in teacher education projects and activities. We have student teachers and also teachers who are in service. Student teachers are exposed to archival materials during their project work, as you have heard from the other speakers, because they are dealing with adults, and these student teachers are the one that I'm talking about. And the teachers who are in service also need to have the skills to use archival materials in their projects with their students. And also classroom units of instruction on work and role of archives. We have high achievers and low achievers, yeah, in the classroom. Students with different abilities and students with different styles of learning. Some students learn through observation, some students learn through listening, some students learn through sensing or touching the archive material. So we have different kind of students, and teachers try to expose them to materials so that they can learn through their styles. Yeah, okay. And also exhibitions and visit, as I mentioned earlier. If there are any exhibitions and visits that has been set up, schools are invited, or schools usually apply to go for the exhibitions and visits. And project involving students in archival research, this will be done in group works, okay. Okay, the production of archive-based teaching kits. Okay, I think this is very important for the teachers. They can work with the archivers, yeah, with you people. Work with us to come up with the kits so that it can be used in the classroom. And the use of students to identify and collect materials of interest. For example, family history, local history, history of the school. This can be done by the teachers quite easily. It is quite common in the school for the teachers to do. The formation of school-based archive, as I mentioned, they have special rooms where they have set up the archives in their own school. This is to develop the students' sensitivity. The establishment of organizational linkage between teachers and archivists, as I mentioned earlier, we need to work together. We need to collaborate in order for us to introduce archive materials and also the processes to the students. Okay, archivists get themselves on the mailing list. Yeah, please. Teachers in schools may not have the, may not know about you. Okay, I even have a friend whom I know since about 30 over years. Yeah? I didn't know she was working in the National Archive. I only met her when I came for this seminar. So be in the list. Make yourself known to the teachers. So we are very good people. You know, we are very welcoming. we need resources. We need a lot of resources for our students. Interesting things that we can use in the classroom. Archivists represent in curriculum committees, yeah, as mentioned in one of the presentation. You can sit with the curriculum developers to make sure there are some archival projects or materials that can be used in the classroom. Archivists work out in service program for teachers and also work with teachers, federation as resource providers, and joint programs in schools, yeah? Okay, I'm sure you do that in your countries, but you can be more active. Okay, these are some of the projects that we have done. Reading and literacy programs with the kids. These kids are actually Aboriginal kids, yeah, of Malaysia. So we showed them videos of Malacca, a historical place in Malaysia. Then we took them there, okay, to experience what it is like. They're from all over Malaysia, and they had a very good time there, learning and also doing some note-taking along the way. Okay, this is example of Kuala Lumpur, map of Kuala Lumpur. A group of students studied, yeah, and they were asked to compare modern Kuala Lumpur with the picture as given, okay? And the projects was extended with discussion of Kuala Lumpur in the past, history, geography, and economics, and also the culture in the region. Okay, these were the examples of projects that teachers do in classroom, which uses archival materials, and I'm very confident that the classroom can be very exciting and very interesting for the students when we use the archival materials, and you people can be really of great help to us teachers in making our classroom lively and interesting. Thank you very much.